I'm Jonathan Sabo. I'm going to be going over Calico Enterprise Multi-Cluster Management today. Just a couple of things before we dive into multi-cluster management specifically. We'll just talk a little bit about what is Project Calico. Well, hopefully you're all aware, but Project Calico, it's a community. It is the community that develops and maintains Calico, which is the open source networking and network security solution for containers, virtual machines, and host-based workloads. So network connectivity, network security for network security isolation and visibility troubleshooting for container workloads in Kubernetes, also for VMs and bare metal nodes outside of Kubernetes clusters. Project Calico, you can find us at projectcalico.org or at Project Calico on Twitter. If you're interested in joining the community and taking part in the open source development of Project Calico, you can find us at GitHub /Project Calico. If you are just getting started and you have questions or comments or just want to kind of keep an eye on the project and look around, you can join us on the Calico user Slack at slack.projectcalico.org. There's at least 400,000 people that are on there in the various channels. I would definitely join the Kubernetes and the networking channel and the install channel if you're just getting started, or one of the specific channels like Windows or eBPF if you're interested in the latest, greatest data plane. We have over 150 contributors at this point to the open source project. And Calico is powering network connectivity, network security, and well over 1 million nodes across over 150,000 different clusters across the internet. Today, we're going to go over one of the Calico Enterprise capabilities called multi-cluster management. So Calico Enterprise is built on top of the Project Calico open source project. It has some Kubernetes and Kubernetes network security superpowers, in addition to some enterprise features around collaboration on network policy, some enterprise features around visibility into Kubernetes workloads and the security, scaling security and visibility across multiple clusters. So today we're going to go over a little bit just an overview of what multi-cluster management is and how it's architected. And then I'm just going to do a demo of the multi-cluster management, the setup, and then we'll actually add a new cluster. So we'll install Calico Enterprise and we will add it to the single pane of glass, the multi-cluster management web UI, and we'll look around. And then we'll have time at the end for any questions that might come up. But as I mentioned earlier, just feel free to just drop any questions that you have as we go through this into the chat here in the Zoom chat. So multi-cluster management, what we give you is a single management plane to scale security across all of your clusters. So as you start to build out your Kubernetes environments, what tends to happen is you'll have more than one. You'll either for just isolating workloads from one another or being able to model your release environment. A lot of people have like a dev cluster, a staging cluster, a production cluster, or lots of production clusters. And it's advantageous to be able to manage and view the network security controls and the traffic visibility that you get with Calico and Calico Enterprise from a single place. So you have a single web interface and you can quickly browse across all of your managed clusters and get a sense of the traffic that's flowing inside the cluster and to be able to manage the network access controls that you're implementing via Calco policy. We also have some other capabilities around traffic controls between clusters. So as you have more than one cluster, Calico Enterprise has the ability to federate the endpoint identity, the services, and the policy, and allow you to control network traffic between clusters. So we give you the ability to view and manage the multiple clusters that you might add to your multi-cluster management environment. And we also allow you to control traffic between them. In addition to that, multi-cluster management, it allows you to designate a specific cluster as your management cluster, and that will allow you to centralize the monitoring, the alerting, the authentication, the logging infrastructure for that set of managed clusters. This is a nice high level diagram and visualization that kind of depicts the concept here. We have a management cluster where we've centralized our authentication, our logging and monitoring, and we give you that single pane of glass from which you monitor and manage the managed clusters that you see down there below. And you can add as many managed clusters as you want to this management cluster, the single pane of glass. And you can scale out your multi-cluster environments as you see fit. A lot of people will have more than one management cluster. They'll have a management cluster in a particular physical region or a failure domain, or a lot of times they'll just have one, and they'll have a single pane of glass to manage and control their geographically dispersed managed clusters. It will allow you to monitor and audit the security and compliance of all of your Kubernetes clusters from a single location. It's also really nice to allows you to quickly troubleshoot connectivity issues across the different Kubernetes clusters. Calico Enterprise will make it blatantly obvious to you when you are seeing denied traffic, and you can very quickly identify that across sets of clusters as your Kubernetes environment grows and scales out. You also get you can manage authentication and logging from a single source of truth, that management cluster. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it also supports federated use cases when you are trying to, when you have groups of clusters that need to communicate across cluster. Maybe one of the more common use cases is teams will have multiple dev clusters, multiple staging or test clusters, and multiple prod clusters, and they want to create rules that say dev can talk to dev, and prod can talk to prod, and staging can talk to staging, but dev should never be able to talk to prod. And the federated endpoint identity capabilities makes that possible. Another scenario that comes up from time to time is if you happen to have clusters separated across the world geographically, and you happen to have security criteria, something like GDPR, where you have data sovereignty requirements, and you have to ensure that traffic in the EU is isolated to that particular region. We give you the ability to create network policy control, Calco network policy, and you'd be able to create controls to enforce the communication across clusters, fulfilling that particular security criteria. This is on the right, you can see a high-level architecture diagram, and what we want to kind of take away here is that there's a couple of different flavors or types of clusters that you can have in the Calico Enterprise multi-cluster management architecture. You can have a standalone installation where it's an all-in-one. You have a single cluster, it has the management UI, you have the LMA, the logging, monitoring, and alerting stack, and everything is all inside of a single cluster. And you can, or you can choose to designate a particular cluster as your management cluster, and then centrally manage the LMA stack, the logging, monitoring, the required disk space and storage to store things like your flow logs and the alert data all centrally. And then you can add managed clusters which connect back to the management cluster over a secure tunnel. The tunnel connection is instantiated from the managed cluster to the management cluster. And this it makes it really easy if you have managed clusters that are behind firewalls or separated across different environments. Maybe you have a managed cluster for every cloud environment. You've got one in AWS, one in Google, one in Microsoft Azure, and your management cluster is on-prem. The managed clusters connect back out to the management cluster. So as long as your management cluster is available, you will be able to centrally manage network security policy and very quickly become aware of any network security issues and troubleshoot those and drill down and just generally scale security across your infrastructure. So Calico Enterprise, it's can be deployed in across all of the environments you see here down below. It enables multi-cluster management, not just in the cloud or just on-prem. It's hybrid and multi-cloud. All of those environments that you see here depicted across the different cloud providers and the hosted Kubernetes distributions, in addition to the managed Kubernetes distributions. Calico Enterprise Multi-Cluster Management works seamlessly in all of these environments. And it's a way to centralize control and to centrally manage the network security for your Kubernetes environments across one or all of these different environments. I think it's just kind of important to point out. And it's one of the things that differentiates our solution from other solutions. The ability to be so flexible in our ability to provide network connectivity, network security, and the centralized management across all these disparate environments. We have some additional upcoming events. We'll come back to this in just a moment. We'll just stop here and we'll get into the demo now. All right, so this is the Calico Enterprise Manager dashboard. And you can see here that we're looking currently, this is one of the management clusters. And you can see I've added a couple of different managed clusters. These managed clusters, these are all in Azure. The management cluster is in AWS. If we take a look at the nodes that make up this cluster, you guys will probably recognize this convention here for the host names here, and if not, the EC2 should give it away, right? This is the management cluster is running inside of AWS, and we've added 4 different managed clusters. And you can see we've got one here. These are all in Microsoft Azure. I built these out with AKS engine. So these are self-hosted Kubernetes clusters in the Azure cloud. And I have one cluster deployed to these different geographic regions. And you can take a look here. We can see these are the nodes that make up the management cluster. And just as we go from cluster to cluster, you can see how the node names change as we go from East US to North Europe, from North Europe to West Europe, from West Europe to West US. So East Coast, West Coast of the United States, North and West inside of the Europe geographic region. We come back over here to the management cluster. Calico Enterprises it gives you a lot of different visibility at a high level. You can see the dashboard here. You can see that the total number of network policies that are deployed to this particular cluster, the number of endpoints. You can see the number of nodes inside of the cluster. You can see the histogram here that's showing the allowed and denied traffic for each individual policy. You get a cluster-wide view of the total connections, the allowed bytes, the allowed packets, and then the denied bytes and denied packets. And you can see that there currently isn't any denied bytes or packets. You can see that we have a main policy dashboard, and you can graphically manage, create, edit, delete network policy using the UI. If you come in here, I'll just kind of show you some of the capabilities that you have. You can very quickly and easily create network policies for the various protocols that you might have to secure connections between applications running inside of your cluster. So it gives you a graphical user interface to manage policy. One of the other features of Calico Enterprise is our ability to have policy tiers. Here you can see that we have a default tier, and that's all well and good. We could be managing all of our different microservices right here inside of the default tier. But when we start to work with other teams, we start to collaborate across, like the networking team, the security compliance team, the information security team. They might have policies of their own that they want to bake into the cluster. And so maybe the security team could have a tier that's a higher preference tier, and allow them to apply policy ahead of, say, the development teams. Or maybe we have the platform team has a set of policies that they want to have that supersede the developer policies. This is a pattern that we see quite a bit. We'll have, so as traffic is evaluated in the cluster, it's evaluated from top to bottom, left to right across these tiers. And so a lot of times we'll have the security teams will bake their policies into the cluster deployment. So the security teams will be making sure that, hey, the development teams aren't going to put the company at risk. The platform teams are making sure that the policies the development teams are using are they're going to use our shared services, our standards, and they're not going to put the cluster's availability at risk. Those sorts of things you can bake in here using the tiered policies. Again, we can create these and then quickly manage these across sets of clusters using our multi-cluster management capabilities. All right, let's see here. So let me just quick check, see if we have any questions. No questions yet. All right, so what we're gonna do for the demo today is we're gonna add another cluster, another managed cluster to our multi-cluster management setup. We're gonna do that by coming to our docs. This is, if you go to docs.tigera.io, and you come down here to operations and you see multi-cluster management, you can configure multi-cluster management for your cluster. And if you scroll down here, you can see how to turn a cluster into a management cluster. And so that's what we're going to do together now. I have built a EKS cluster. So I have another cluster inside of AWS that we're going to add to this multi-cluster management setup. So the first thing we want to do is we need to create and expose the multi-cluster management UI. And I've already gone through and done this. So this is already been done for us. As we come down here, you can see that we want to add the managed cluster to the management cluster. And so that's what we're going to do now. So let's do this. Come over here. We're going to give it a name. So this is our the EKS cluster that I've already built out for us. I've just deployed a 2-node EKS cluster to US East, and you can see that we just have some pods here. We're using the AWS CNI, so we're going to deploy Calico Enterprise in a policy enforcement only mode. We're not going to be assigning IP addresses to pods. The AWS CNI is going to be doing that, but we'll have Calico and Calico Enterprise capabilities to enforce network security policy across all of those workloads. And we'll also be able to get flow logs and all the visibility that comes with the features and functionality that we build on top of that. So the first thing I want to do is we want to add, we want to come to our management cluster, and let's just check and make sure that these nodes are different. Let's look at these real quick. All right, so we're talking to the management cluster now, and what we're going to do, come back over here, just copy and paste. We're going to give this new cluster a name. We're going to call this one Calico Demo EKS. All right, and we are going to add the managed cluster by saving this manifest locally. So we're just going to copy and paste this here, and then we're going to go ahead and run that. All right. And so we're just going to follow the instructions to install Calico Enterprise. And as we'll in here in just a short bit, you'll see that this Calico Demo EKS cluster will become connected. and we'll be able to start to manage network security policy on this new managed cluster. So we're just going to go through here. So the first part we need to do is Calico Enterprise, in Calico open source as well, the latest installation is done via an operator-based install. We also have support for Helm, and I think for the open source version of Calico, we still do supply the manual manifest installations, but we're going to go through the operator-based installation today. So the first part we need to do is just deploy the operator YAML, and then the Tigera Prometheus operator. If you already have Prometheus installed inside of your cluster, you don't have to use our Prometheus operator. You can use your own. Oh, whoops, this is actually the wrong cluster. Let me come here. Boom. Let's go here. We're going to go here. And we'll just go ahead and change this to create. All right. That looks a lot better. All righty. All right, and then so the next thing we want to do is we want to apply the Tigera Prometheus operator, because we are not going to have that in our cluster yet. Create -F. All right, and we're just going to follow the docs from top to bottom. You can see the documentation here is pretty succinct for this for Calico Enterprise. It's only a few steps here that we need to apply, and I'm going to cheat. Just grab this from my history. Apply the pull secret that you get when you sign up for Calco Enterprise. We give you a license key and a pull secret. And so this is one of the next things that you need to, one of the things where you'll need to make changes. When you pull down this custom resources.yaml, if you are going to turn your cluster from a standalone into a managed cluster, you want to remove a couple of the different custom resources. You'll want to remove the manager. You'll want to remove the log storage, because all of that is going to be centrally located in your management cluster. And then once you've edited the custom resources.yaml and you've removed those resources, you can just apply those, the custom resources.yaml. And I've already downloaded this from the internets. And then we're just gonna come over here and we're gonna watch the operator work. in a little bit, we should see that Calico should come up and the API server should come up. Once the API server is up, we're gonna apply the license. And then we'll check the docs and see what are our next steps to completing the installation. This is a really handy way of keeping an eye on the state and status of your Calico Enterprise cluster. You can quickly just do kubectl get Tigera status and see, hey, are all of my components up and running? And so we have Calico and the API server are both available. And that means that we can now apply our license. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. And let's come back here and take a look at the next steps. And then it says, so we're going to monitor the progress of the installation. And then we're going to finish up by adding the managed Calico network policies. And then we're going to add some, we're going to create some cluster role bindings so that the user defined in the management cluster will be able to manage this particular managed cluster. We'll just let this go for a moment. While I do that, I'll take a look and see what we have going on here. All right, so we have the Calico, the kube controllers, and we have the API server going. Just want to take a look here. Normally when I do this, there's always like one thing I forget, and I want to make sure that I don't mess that up here. So we have, we've applied the manage cluster. Oh, that's what it is. All right, here we go. All right. So when we created that first step that we did, we created this, this YAML file. And what it is, we take a look at it. It is the certificates required to authenticate and bring up the tunnel. So now we're going to apply that. And now we should see a couple of other pieces coming up. All right, here we go. Let me just go ahead and we'll watch the status. And you can see the management cluster connection is now coming up. And the other components are starting to progress as well. You can see that the continuous compliance, the intrusion detection, and the log collectors are going to start being spawned here inside of our managed cluster. And you can see that we have the connection is available. Come back over here. You can see that it's now connected. And I'll just show you really quickly. If we come here and we look at the nodes, and if I was to browse to the EKS cluster, it'll tell me no, so I can't authenticate to you, not yet. So I'm gonna come back here, and let's go back to the terminal. All right, so we now have a Calico Enterprise cluster up and running, and we've added it to the management cluster. So we have our single pane of glass to gain visibility and manage all of our network policies. And I'm going to cheat and add all of my users. This is just creating the cluster role binding for the different secure service accounts that I'm logging into the managed cluster, and I'm using to be able to manage network policy. So we come over here now. If I come back to the EKS cluster, now you can see that we got our nodes here, and you can see that everything is green. We don't have those red errors anymore, and we see we don't have any network policy. But we have the ability to browse and to manage network policy across our cluster. Let's come over here and let's finish out the steps here. I'll just grab this policy and we'll apply that, and then we'll take a look at the cluster. You can see now we've got our allow Tigera tier, which is the highest preference tier. And you can see that we have some policies here. This is our break glass tier. It just secures the management connection in a couple of the components inside of the cluster. And you can see that you can you can see that there's some allowed packets being used here. And as we browse over our managed cluster, you can see that we have a cluster-wide view of all of the changes that happen inside of our cluster. So these are the audit logs for the network policies. If we come inside of a particular policy, you can see that we have the change log per policy and then the policies across the entire cluster. That's the timeline. You can see all the endpoints inside of your cluster. And you can see the labels that are applied to the particular workload. You can see the IP addresses and the VEF pair. And you can see the policies that are secured. The different components in here, we just applied that fluentd. So you can see that we've got our allow Tigera tier fluentd policy is restricting the what this particular service is allowed to do. You can see the nodes in the cluster, and you can see all the managed clusters. And then we have our flow visualization. This will take a moment to get set up on the managed cluster. So I'll come back to this, and I'm just going to show it to you really quickly on the managed cluster, because this will already have flow logs going. And then I'll show you the flow logs that come with Calico Enterprise. So this is the Calico Enterprise flow visualization. And this is really nice. It allows you to quickly browse across the different namespaces, and you can see the different, the flows in the cluster. So we can see that, like, it looks like Calco Kube controllers is doing DNS lookups. And you can see that the alert manager is also doing DNS lookups, and then the Tigera manager and Fluentd is doing DNS lookups. So these are some of the communication in your cluster that you're going to want to know about, and then as you add policy to secure things, you're going to want to make sure that this is allowed traffic. And what it does is it gives you a way to look and see all the allowed traffic, all the denied traffic. You can see there currently isn't any, the flows across a specific namespace, or even a particular workload inside of your cluster. And it allows you to just drill in and visually inspect the flows inside of your cluster. In addition to that, we give you some compliance reporting for like CIS benchmarks, a detailed inventory report, a network access report, and then a policy audit report. If you're interested in changes over time, a lot of times the management teams will be interested in these kinds of pieces of information, or your compliance teams, and you can download and send that off to management. We also give you a Kibana dashboard that allows you to take a look at the Calico Enterprise flow data. Calico Enterprise flow logs. This is one of the more powerful parts of the visibility that comes with Calico Enterprise specifically. The ability to dig into the flows in the cluster. We'll just take a look at one of these real quick. So in addition to the 5 tuple flow logs that you get with like normal flow logs, with normal flow logs, you would see like the source IP, the destination IP, the source port, the destination port. We also infuse the flow logs with the Kubernetes metadata. So as you know, Kubernetes workloads, pods in particular, they're ephemeral. And as time goes by, Kubernetes will orchestrate those workloads based on a number of different pieces of information based on the availability of the nodes in your cluster. As nodes die, Kubernetes will move workloads from node to node, or even things like the available CPU or memory or other custom metrics that you might be interested in having your workloads being orchestrated on. Maybe you want to make sure that there's there's enough available disk space or something along those lines, and moving workloads from node to node. And as those workloads are moved, the IP addresses of those workloads will change over time. And so if all you're recording is the IP address information, the stuff that comes in, stuff like AWS flow logs, their VPC flow logs, you won't have, as workloads are orchestrated, the IP addresses are going to change. And so you really need to have another source of identity to really know, hey, what was this particular microservice on this given date and time? And that's where the Calco Enterprise flow logs really shine. They give you that information. They give you the source and destination workload names in addition to the IP addresses, the labels that are applied to those workloads, which ultimately decide whether or not traffic is allowed or denied. And you can see here the policies. You can see that this traffic is being evaluated across the Calco Enterprise tiers, the compliance controls tiers, and then being passed over to the default tier, and then ultimately being allowed. So that is what I wanted to show you today, was kind of show you how quickly and how easy it is to get set up with Calico Enterprise's multi-cluster management, and how easy it is to quickly add a new managed cluster to your management cluster, and then gain the ability to manage network policies, the visibility that you gain, and then just the ability to centrally manage everything, the single pane of glass that you get to view all of your Kubernetes clusters. We have some additional upcoming events. It looks like October 1st, I'm not sure what today is, it's the 28th or 29th. So later on this week and next week, we have some additional events coming up. Calco Network Policy on OpenShift. So if you're running clusters on OpenShift, Calco and Calco Enterprise seamlessly integrate with OpenShift and add some additional capabilities on there. So you can see Calco network policy and OpenShift. You can also see the compare and contrast of the Calico network policies versus Kubernetes network policies. We have a couple of different events in the EU time zone. So if you wake up on the East Coast super early, or you're in Europe or the Far East, we have some events coming up here in your time zone, so you don't have to stay up really late to take advantage of these. I'm going to be doing another multi-cluster management event on the 8th, and we're going to go over the federated identity and services portion of multi-cluster management. What we're going to do in that one is we're going to take the same clusters that you saw today that are in these different environments, and we're going to create network policies that restrict traffic and control, like global traffic control between those clusters. So if you're interested in federated identity, global traffic control, if you have to be able to, if you have to have security criteria like for GDPR, definitely come back and join on that date, and we'll show you that. We also have some troubleshooting events happening. We are partnered with Rancher and also with Fortinet, and it looks like on the 13th we're going to be doing our extending your Fortinet FortiManager to Kubernetes. You can also we also have some integrations with FortiGuard. And then, yeah, we just open sourced our Calico for Windows capabilities. So if you're interested in learning about Calico for our Windows networking, we're going to have a networking in a brave new world of containers, an implementer's guide, in-depth guide, and I think I cut off the title here, but this is for that's going to be a Windows networking event. We also, if you want to get up and running and try out Calico Enterprise really quickly, you can join us at tigera.io/trial. That will let you sign up and on your own time, in your own trial environment, test out the auto creation, the policy preview and staging, some of the troubleshooting tools that you saw here today, the flow visualizer, the UI, policy for external access controls. If you have, if you want to use DNS names in your policy, those sorts of things, and then some security team controls and compliance reporting, and just generally get a sense of how you can use Calico Enterprise enterprise features to build yourself like a self-service network policy enforcement system that allows you to collaborate across the different teams that you're probably working with in your organization on your Kubernetes network policy and network security controls. Let me just take a quick look at the chat and see if we can answer some of these questions here with the time we have left. The question is, hello, you said you have one control plane for multiple clusters, but in our company, we have some nodes that aren't in our infrastructure and are not totally trusted. In this case, is this okay to have a different control plane? Yeah, absolutely. Calico Enterprise Multi-Cluster Management, it's there's three different flavors of it, really. There's three different cluster types. There's that standalone cluster where it's all in one. So if you had a team where the nodes they're not in your infrastructure and they're not totally trusted, maybe you decide to segment that off into its own standalone Calico Enterprise setup. Or maybe you decide to add those nodes as a managed cluster to your central management cluster, but you use Kubernetes RBAC to control what can happen as far as the management of those untrusted clusters or untrusted nodes of those clusters. So multi-cluster management, it works right along with Kubernetes RBAC. So you have the ability to centrally control and manage certain things, but the authorization components are going to be managed in the managed cluster using Kubernetes RBAC. And if you, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of information. if you want to really game out that scenario, you can hit us up in the Calco user Slack, or just send us an email. We'd definitely be interested in hearing more about the use case of adding potentially untrusted managed clusters to a trusted management cluster, or how you might game out that scenario. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I hope everybody enjoyed the event. Definitely join us on one of these next events, and hopefully we see each other again soon.